Look, every week I try to think of some compelling way to tell you how busy it has been this week. I'm like a broken record, right? We have a potential date for Flight 11 already after a massive one for Starship, but it is just the tip of the iceberg. In fact, there has been too much going on to even try attempting to convey to you that there has been a lot going on. So yeah, all I'll say is this. Thanks for being here. This one is packed.
Okay, Neil, we can see you coming down the ladder now.
This video is sponsored by Displate. Hey, Marcus House with you here, and kicking right off from where I left you last week, you will hopefully recall seeing Ship 38 head out of the launch complex to be placed on Pad 1 for a static fire. Well, we saw Ship 38 go through 2 attempts to fire its engines, with both of those ultimately aborted before we could see those engines light up. Fear not though, because on Monday this week they were right back at it. They started with the usual actuation tests of all 4 flaps on the vehicle, followed soon after by the tower arms moving up and away into the launch position. The detonation suppression system under the launch mount was tested, and soon enough the tank farm was venting. As that increased in strength, we were certainly seeing SpaceX prepare for the propellant loading. Sure enough, the liquid oxygen started flowing through the tank farm system towards the mount. Now, once the liquid oxygen has eventually made its way to the launch mount, that is when they shut off the vent here and when they start the propellant loading into the ship itself. Now, in a bit of a turn of events compared to the previous ships, which first did the single-engine static fires, the propellant loading continued right up until the ship was almost fully loaded with liquid oxygen. Just the required methane, of course, but this meant that we looked to be going for a full 6-engine static fire right away. Once loading was complete, all we were waiting for was the activation of the flame deflector to spring to life, and there we go. Incredible drone perspective there from SpaceX, and certainly a beautiful looking static fire. They confirmed in the same X post here that the static fire was indeed full duration. So yeah, it was just up to SpaceX to schedule in the move of this last Block 2 ship to fly and head back to the production site to be finalised. It is worth noting that we have seen a bunch of stuff for the very last time. Assuming all is well, this will be the final time that we should ever see a static fire of a Block 2 ship, and the last time that we will likely ever see an upper stage Starship directly sitting on an orbital launch mount with these makeshift adapters. Preparations for the rollback kicked off not long after. The crew removed the ship quick disconnect plate, and there we go. It was lifted from the launch mount, and as night fell, it was set down on the transport stand. Just a couple of hours later, here it was already rolling away from the pad. Sean was out there, of course, as it rolled back in to be smoothly placed inside Megabay 2. Afterward, through a narrow gap, we could see the team lifting the ship and moving it over to one of the workstations to kick off the final steps for the launch. Now, unlike what we saw with the previous flight, this time SpaceX seemed happier to just take their time with the removal of the temporary ship adapter hardware on the launch mount. That most likely gave the team enough time to fully check the static fire data and inspect the ship itself inside Megabay 2 to ensure that no Raptor engines would need to be replaced. On Friday, however, the SpaceX crane was here lifting off the ship adapter from the launch mount, and that was to be followed by the makeshift quick disconnect adapter. So with all that done, how are we looking for Starship Flight 11, the final launch of Block 2 vehicles? Well, early in the week we had seen a local notice to mariners suggesting as early as October 6th, but just this past day that has been bumped to the 13th, so in just over 2 weeks we may already be back again watching Starship blast off the pad. Thanks for all the great questions, being subscribed and watching by the way. It's almost bizarre to see how quickly this one has come up. It hasn't quite been 5 weeks since Flight 10, and here we are already. By the way, Spreadshirt have a 20% discount on our merch designs going on until the end of the month, so yeah, this is all well timed. Now, of course, after Flight 11, we are going to have a good chunk of space between the next flight. Never fear though, there's going to be plenty of action. With SpaceX shifting to Block 3 vehicles and the new Pad 2, there is a bunch of exciting test articles and testing to do. The launch mount at Pad 1, on the other hand, is going to be demolished and a new upgraded flame trench installed instead. The big question is, will SpaceX start ripping into that process as soon as possible, or will the circular mount stick around for a while yet? Let us know what you think. Now with Pad 2 they've continued with even more tests of the Deluge system this week under the launch mount. Thanks to NSF you could see a massive cloud of mist flowing out, but the power of the system is made more obvious by all of the water overflowing this ledge here. SpaceX will be sticking with the next generation Block 3 design for quite a while, but with the generations that follow, it's important to have a Deluge system that is powerful enough for the inevitable increase in thrust as all these new generations come online. Now with all of the testing that we've seen so far of the Deluge system, what we haven't seen yet is this. Remember, at the top of the launch pad we essentially have this sandwich of steel that is going to have water blasted through it. The first tests of this are likely coming very soon, so stay tuned. The tank farm close by is being tested more too, with one of those telltale signs being this substantial plume generated by the vent boxes where they disperse the vented gases in a more direct manner, which also ensures that no gas builds up inside the tank farm. Now over at the production site to prepare the booster for its second and final mission, we watched the hot staging ring roll from the Star Factory and over into Mega Bay 1. This bay currently hosts Booster 12, which we believe is likely being prepared for a display article somewhere. It has the first ever Block 3 Booster 18 being constructed and obviously Booster 15 preparing for Flight 11 here shortly, so this hot stage ring was obviously for this upcoming flight. We saw this being lifted by the bridge crane for installation, and again it's going to be the last time that we ever see a flight with this hot staging ring separating away. Late in the week a booster transport stand moved into the ring yard, and a few hours later Flight 11's Booster 15 was lifted on top. Before we knew it, here it was already rolling out, and at the time of exporting this video it was parked at the rocket garden waiting patiently for its trip to Pad 1 for launch. The next day another transport stand was moved into the ring yard too, but this is one of the older generation stands that they used previously. This too was moved in soon enough, so the work on Booster 12 must be wrapped up. We expect to see this heading out for display once again. Booster 18, which at this point consists of the full liquid oxygen tank all the way from the common dome right down to the aft section, has now been moved over to the left side of the bay. This may mean that construction of its methane section could be starting even sooner than I had expected, kicking off of course with the amazing integrated hot staging assembly on the top. Speaking of that, the B18.3 test article that we've already spoken about a few times now has been moved over to Massey's as it prepares for its testing campaign. This is mainly made up of the new integrated hot staging assembly at the top, followed by a booster common dome, and finally a very early stage of what would normally be the aft section. This one, however, only has stringers on the inside. In fact, the testing campaign has already kicked off with it frosting up here quite nicely. This most likely isn't any sort of major test just yet, but it would be mainly to verify that the tank is able to hold the expected pressures. Now that this is done, they can build up the structural verification rigging on it to begin pushing it harder. Over here, we can also see that SpaceX has formulated a new plan to save the concrete bunker, which had complications during its first pour. Workers have cleared away the concrete that they had already removed and reinstalled the formwork around any open rebar to simply re-pour and fill in the spaces. We can also see them beginning to set up for the roof over here too, with formwork beams going up to support it while it cures. Now, as we suspected last week, you may notice the absence of any remaining parts of Booster 13, so SpaceX have indeed scrapped it completely and given the area a little cleanup. Over here we can now see that they've begun to install new pipe stands from the output side leading north. This heads toward the new commodities trench where there already seems to be pipes installed facing towards the methane farm. These are headed for the static fire stand, so it's good confirmation that SpaceX wants to combine all their commodities into the one trench just like they do at the launch site. It is all a massive upgrade for protection. With this trench, the new concrete bunker and the new blast wall, everything is going to be shielded beautifully from events like this causing major damage in the future. For reference, this is what the site looked like just 3 months ago after that mishap. There were so many systems close to the pad super exposed. Of course, it was all inevitably going to be upgraded to support the future generation vehicles anyway, so it's all been a great excuse to rip right back into this. Zooming into the ship quick disconnect structure back here, we can see that it got blown backwards and mangled. Fast forward to this week though, SpaceX are making great progress erecting the much larger steel truss sections that we mentioned being lifted in last week. Now, what you see here was definitely the most exciting launch of the week with NASA's IMAP mission. Before I jump into that though, check this out. These are Displate's awesome metal prints and the sponsor of this video. They make decorating ridiculously easy. No nails, no frames, and no wall damage, so great if you happen to be renting. They instead just use a simple magnetic mounting system. So yeah, I've had these James Webb Space Telescope displays up here for a few months now, but it is time for a refresh. I've just picked up some new ones from some of my favourite space missions. Cassini at Saturn, which ended back in 2017, the Parker Solar Probe out there giving us unprecedented data of the Sun, and the Kepler Space Telescope that gave us so many insights into thousands of exoplanets. It is so easy to pop these on. You clean your wall, stick on the adhesive base, and the magnet just goes right on top. Now the displates just snap right onto that. The best thing though is how easy it is to swap out the designs. Case in point, I also picked up a few of the extra large sets which come in 4 panels. Launched in 2004, Rosetta is one of my favourite missions, making history by achieving the first ever rendezvous with a comet, even deploying the Philae lander. How about the Spitzer Space Telescope giving us so much in the infrared? That all led to what came next with the James Webb Space Telescope. Actually, you might notice this one has an added tactile surface that Displate call their Textra Finish, making the images feel as good as they look. Displates come in a huge range of designs, of course, not just space. Over 2 million options covering everything from nature, movies, games, comics, or anything in between. Once you place your order, delivery takes just 4 to 5 days. So yeah, check them out at displate.com/MarcusHouse or use code MarcusHouse to get a massive 32% off 1 or 2 displates or 37% off 3 or more before the end of September. Those are special discounts for Displate's Collectors Fest, and that even applies to the Textra Finish option too. Thank you, Displate. So NASA's IMAP mission this week was spectacular, and Greg Scott was of course out there super invested in this one, not just here patiently awaiting the launch itself, which had been delayed a little, but also weeks ago too. On Wednesday, it was finally go time, and off it flew on the always reliable Falcon 9. This booster, number 1096, was only on its second flight, so almost brand new. Now this is an ambitious mission, all designed to map our solar system's heliosphere and beyond. Tagging along was NASA's Geocorona Observatory and space weather follow-on Lagrange 1. Yes, as the name implies, all 3 payloads are heading out to Lagrange Point 1, which is about 1.5 million kilometres closer to the Sun from here. I love these positions because of how they work. Normally, the closer an orbit is to the Sun, the shorter the orbital period, but right here is a perfect balance between the Sun pulling at a spacecraft and the Earth then pulling back, which increases the orbital period again. At this L1 point, the object's orbital period becomes exactly equal to Earth's orbital period, so it is a perfect spot for this sort of observation mission. Greg had the chance to see these incredible satellites up close a couple of weeks ago actually, and thanks to his work, we've got wonderful views of all 3 payloads right from the clean room before they were even integrated between Falcon 9's fairings. These missions are crucial for advancing our understanding of heliophysics, space weather and radiation, Earth's magnetic fields, and how they all interact together. Fortunately, our magnetic field here protects us from most of the intense radiation, but few planets are this lucky. Mars, for instance, despite being much further away from the Sun than we are, receives radiation doses up to 700 times higher than on Earth. This wasn't always the case though, because scientists believe that Mars used to have a planetary magnetic field and even had liquid water before it lost the magnetic field around 4 billion years ago. Now unshielded, this contributed to the gradual stripping away of most of its atmosphere and the loss of its surface water. Yeah, we are very lucky to have a protective shield, and if we didn't, we wouldn't be here to research this and ask the questions. If we take a much bigger step back, about 14 billion kilometres away from our planet, we find that our entire solar system is continually being bombarded by high-energy ions from interstellar space. Luckily, the solar wind that flows outward from the Sun forms somewhat of a protective bubble around the entire edge of the solar system. That bubble is called the heliosphere, and this pushes back most of the radiation. It is, however, constantly changing due to the Sun's 11-year activity cycle and the influence of solar storms. What IMAP, or the Interstellar Mapping and Acceleration Probe, aims to do is to map out the entire heliosphere by studying these high-energy particles. IMAP will not only study the particles coming from the Sun, but also study the particles from distant galaxies of interstellar space. In particular, though, it's going to track energetic neutral atoms. These form when charged solar wind particles collide with interstellar particles at the boundary of the heliosphere. They then become neutral, and since that stops them from being affected by magnetic fields, they travel in straight lines carrying information of their origin. IMAP is going to use these to dynamically map the structure and behaviour of the heliosphere, which is just so cool. The other bonus is that while observing all of this from Lagrange Point 1 using all of its 10 scientific instruments, it can even provide about 30 minutes of advanced warning about incoming bursts of harmful radiation. That will be super useful information for astronauts and spacecraft near Earth. Now, the space weather follow-on Lagrange 1, on the other hand, is one of the secondary payloads on this mission, and this is a dedicated space weather observation satellite operated by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. This is going to track the Sun's corona at all times, observing activities such as solar flares and coronal mass ejections. It is going to measure the storm severity and speed firsthand, and this data is going to mean that we can generate real-time forecasts and give us early warnings of any storms heading our way. Finally, we have the Geocorona Observatory to study the outermost layer of our Earth's atmosphere. By using far ultraviolet cameras, it's going to capture the most detailed continuous images ever of our geocorona from the same Lagrange point. Now, the geocorona is a vast cloud of hydrogen surrounding Earth. What this mission is trying to determine is how this region changes during solar storms. We want to better understand how hydrogen escapes from Earth into space and understand its role in both space weather and the long-term loss of water from the planet. All of this I find incredibly interesting. Now, SpaceX pulled this launch off flawlessly, of course. We had the first glimpse of the spacecraft at Fairing-Jettison, and just minutes later, Booster 1096 made its second landing on the drone ship. Just read the instructions. Now, to get all three of these payloads on their way, they needed a huge push, and at 1 hour and 12 minutes, a massive second burn of the upper stage there lasting just a little over a minute had this well on the way. Soon after, the deployment sequence. First, IMAP here was to be deployed in quite a dramatic way. Just before though, if you look carefully at this view behind Daryl, you can see a camera located inside the propellant tank. You can clearly see the small amount of remaining propellant rotating inside. Yes, this second stage was intentionally spinning at 4 revolutions per minute, so when released, the IMAP was also then continuing to spin while on its way to the destination. This is all done for stabilisation reasons, of course. It now has full sky coverage with its particle sensors, and this orientation will keep its solar panels facing the sun. The Falcon 9 second stage then quickly halted the spin to prepare for the deployment of the remaining 2 payloads. Next up was Space Weather Follow-on Lagrange 1, and finally the Geocorona Observatory. I can't wait to see all 3 of these missions kick off. Now, along with that, of course, some more rapid-fire Falcon 9 missions of the week. Starlink Group 1027 early Sunday morning from Space Launch Complex 40, only Flight 11 for Booster 1085, 28 Starlink satellites for the mega constellation in this stack, and a shortfall of Gravitas waiting to pick up the beast downrange. Next up on Monday morning was another lifting away from the foggy Slick 4E at Vandenberg. Not a Starlink, but instead another National Reconnaissance Office mission with NROL 48. The Booster 1081 was flying for its 18th time, but of course, given these are always secretive payloads, they've not shared any specifics about this mission. All of the same, based on what we do know, these satellites are believed to be a batch of Starshield satellites. What was interesting though is that this was a return to launch site mission, so the total payload mass must have been quite a bit less, or they would have needed a drone ship recovery. Soon enough, here was the booster making its way back down onto landing zone 4, so yeah, another spectacular landing, even if it was a little more of a foggy view this time. Now this left just 2 rapid-fire Starlink missions to go for the week. Group 1015 here, back again at Slick 40 in the early hours of Thursday, another batch of 28 satellites for the constellation, and a shortfall of Gravitas there to catch Booster 1080 for its 22nd touchdown. Under 8 hours later from across the country at Vandenberg, looking through that thick layer of fog, here was Group 1711 taking off. Booster 1082 powering this one out of the atmosphere on its 16th flight. A neat view of the 24 Starlinks in the stack for this one, and of course I Still Love You downrange wrapping up another blistering week with 5 Falcon 9 launches fitting comfortably within just 1 week. The amount that SpaceX alone is sending into orbit now is just insane. Just last week, Bryce-Tech here released their Q2 report on global space activity, and it's crazy. Out of about 743 metric tons of all payload mass launched into orbit in just that 1 quarter, SpaceX alone launched 639 tons of that. That's about 86% of all others combined, and once we have Starship flying frequently, they could realistically be doing more than 95%, and that is even before the launch cadence of Starship picks right up. Now, at the start of the week, NASA announced the selection for the All-American 2025 class of astronaut candidates, and with the 10 selected, you may immediately recognise SpaceX's veteran Anna Menon. She has obviously previously worked on astronaut training for the Crew Dragon spacecraft, but is also a biomedical engineer and even a mission specialist who already holds spaceflight experience from the Polaris Dawn mission last year. So yeah, it is exciting to see all these new faces as we watch NASA get ready for the Artemis II mission. Speaking of, the first crewed mission to head out to the moon in over 50 years is getting much closer, and updates this week by NASA indicate this incredible mission is now currently scheduled to launch on February 5 next year at the earliest. So yeah, this is really getting exciting now. There is still a lot that NASA needs to do to meet this earliest launch window. The SLS rocket, though, is fully stacked and ready for launch, and Orion is nearing the final integration. They have, by the way, just announced the name of Orion 2, Integrity. Early next year, we should see the vehicle roll out for a wet dress rehearsal before launch, so it is all coming up really quickly. A few quick Blue Origin mentions. What we are seeing here is the first test article assembled for their Lunar Transporter Sunshield. This is just a section of it, obviously, but the full thing is designed to be one of the largest deployable shields in space, as mentioned by CEO Dave Limp. This will shield both the transporter and the Blue Moon Mark II crew lander from radiation while the two vehicles are docked together. In total, this will be a 20-metre or 66-foot diameter disc with this multi-layer insulation. After all, they need to keep the liquid oxygen and hydrogen from heating up with both vehicles. As a bonus though, the side of this shield that faces the sun is covered with solar arrays. All up, it is supposed to be able to generate around 23 plus kilowatts of power, which is huge. Interestingly, the Blue Moon Pathfinder demo mission we haven't heard much about lately. They are in fact already constructing future landers as well, but as you may have spotted over this last week, NASA has now awarded Blue Origin a commercial lunar payload services mission with an option to deliver a rover to the moon's South Pole region. Yes, you are seeing this right. They want this mission to deliver NASA's Viper, or the Volatiles Investigating Polar Exploration rover. Indeed, this mission still lives on, and it's going to search for volatile resources such as ice on the lunar surface. We also just got a quick update on the second New Glenn mission too, which will of course be launching NASA's Escapade spacecraft. The GS-1 booster here is heading to Launch Complex 36 in early October, where the vehicle will hot fire mid-month after payload integration, with the launch soon after. We also got to witness an Atlas V launch thanks to United Launch Alliance. Yes, they were back with their third Kuiper satellite mission, lifting off just after sunrise from Space Launch Complex 41. This mission carried a batch of 27 Kuiper satellites, adding to the growing constellation, which now numbers 129 in orbit. Now, just for comparison, Falcon 9 in August put up 24, but of course they reused the booster, so that's impressive considering that this was the most powerful Atlas 551 configuration. I believe the base price for this is just over $150 million US. It includes all 5 SRBs roaring away there, and a little less than 2 minutes into the flight, they were jettisoned away. 4.5 minutes later, the main RD-180 engine shut down, leaving the second stage to deliver the satellites. Confirmation of the successful deployment was later shared on X. Now, after nearly a year of silence on Dream Chaser, we finally got an update on Sierra Space's spacecraft just late this week, and unfortunately it is not good news. I have been a massive fan of this program and I can't help but feel pretty disappointed about this one. NASA announced that it is modifying Sierra Space's CRS-2 contract. The company is no longer required to meet the minimum of 7 launches to the International Space Station. We also now officially know that Dream Chaser will not be docking with the ISS on its debut mission either. Instead, its first flight will be a free flight demonstration only. Now, if you recall, I mentioned way back that Dream Chaser's propulsion system has yet to be fully certified, so I'm wondering if this may be one of the reasons that NASA is hesitant to send it to the station. You can see here that NASA stated that they will provide minimal support through the remainder of the development and the flight demonstration. Now, if the free flight demonstration proves successful, NASA may still order resupply missions from Sierra Space. However, it now states clearly that the free flight demonstration is not expected until late 2026. I mean, with the ISS scheduled for deorbit by 2030, it may end up that we will never see it on the station. Not all hope is lost though, because low Earth orbit isn't going to remain uninhabited because we've got a bunch of private space station projects coming up. It's also worth noting that Sierra Space is also planning to get into defense missions too, so we'll just need to be a little more patient, I guess. So that is it for the week, my friends. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, that subscriber button is right there. We do everything we can to get the best information packed in for you every weekend. If you want to continue with more space goodness, check out this video right here next, or maybe these videos. Thanks for watching all this way through. As always, that helps us so much. I will see you all in the next video.